Hey, Sashi, you want to say hello to the people? Hey, say hello. Say hello, little guy. You better get away from there. It's too hot. You go away. Go on. He likes staying by the fire. I have to turn it down here. Oh, the stove gets warm. This is a response back to Frederick. He made a comment concerning the the Ark ship plans for building the Ark ship, the Goshen camps, and the times you're coming into are going to be super critical. You know, trouble times you're coming into. And uh, remember that show on YouTube? It was called 40 Days and 40 Nights. It was about, they knew that the end of the world was coming. And they put a protocol together to build these large ark ships. That and people that became part of the Exodus. That this is done by lottery, right? And this is what's coming. You know, if you take this to a spiritual level perspective, this is what's coming. And God's going to preserve a people, but it's not going to be all believers. It is not going to be all believers. Maybe one out of 300, maybe one out of 1,000. This is what's coming. God's going to preserve a remnant, but the majority of the Christian church is going to go through great judgments, great tribulation, right? Because they don't know the Lord. You know, you can walk in the gifts, you can prophesy until the sun comes up. You could raise the dead. Doesn't say you know the Lord. Not at all. If you don't have that abiding relationship, that's something that I'm learning after nearly 50 years. You know, I'm learning to abide in the shadow of the Lord. Psalms 91 is something that you learn. It's going to cost you everything, right? But God does a work that He raises you up by the resurrection power of His love to prepare you to inherit the kingdom, to be raised up into heavenly places. And this is just before us. The 3 days of darkness is just before us. And when this time comes, that God shall unveil, this will be the timing where the scripture says about the unveiling of the sons of God, that all of creation awaits for the unveiling of this end time ministry, being both men and women. Right? Excuse me for a minute. So I'm saying this just to say this, that the times we're coming into are going to be critical. It's going to be more critical in some places than other places. Coming into a time where there's going to be a complete breakdown in society. But there's also coming a transfer of wealth that will take place after the 3 days of darkness comes. The 3 days of darkness is the kickoff. It's when Jesus returns in the hearts of the people who are waiting for Him. Right? And there's going to be a transfer of wealth like there was back in the time of Joseph, right? When God raised up Joseph during troublous times. And, you know, the monies will come. I'm saying that the monies will come. You don't have to worry about where the money is going to come for building these places of refuge. It will be there. Because it's going to be a last ditch attempt to build the ark, to build these ark communities. Not everyone's going to make it. You know, most of the older generation not going to be around the next couple of years. Sorry to say that, because America is falling like a cannonball to hell, So anyway, we're coming into troublous times, serious times, and I know that the Father has a plan to preserve the remnant. This was shown to me when the Lord took me out of my body in February of 1988. Another month would be about that time. I didn't write about those 7 open visions until 5 years after the fact, because they were so catastrophic. I got to experience firsthand what's coming down, right? But before the complete destruction took place on the West Coast, that's what we're talking about. There's going to be a complete catastrophic destruction that's going to take the lives of around 50 million people on the West Coast of North America, Canada included. In Canada, I saw the faces of 3 million Canadians perish, gone. I saw the faces of tens of thousands of Christians who were caught in judgment, and they're shaking their fist at God and cursing him because they weren't raptured out of judgment. Seen this. And this is something you can't make up. God would have to give you eyes to be able to see something like this. But the hope in the 7 open visions was that just before God declared a time of imminent destruction on the West Coast, that I saw a convoy of 10,000 vehicles leaving the east side of the Surrey Bridge. Surrey is next to Vancouver. So all this entire convoy was on the east side of the bridge. And when the first vehicle got to Chilliwack, which is about 50 miles away, the last vehicle was just leaving. I saw this convoy as a panoramic view, and also was able to see the individual vehicles at the same time. And so when this convoy was fully stretched out, the last vehicle was just leaving the east side of Surrey, coming out of, the Lord took me in on a Zoom, and I saw another convoy. I saw a convoy of transport trucks, 18-wheelers, that were fully loaded with the new type of building technology, but it was covered over. This is 1988. I didn't get to see what was under the tarps, and it's taken this long to develop the technology, right? That this needs to be completed by the end of April. So I got my hands full here, and but I don't want to get burdened down by it. I need to make the Lord. I need to press into the kingdom to learn to abide in the shadow of the Lord and to remain there. That's the only way will be able to finish the work that He's given me. So by the time we come into the end of April, by the release of these plans, the shit's going to hit the fan. Big time. Right? And we need to be ready. So what the Lord showed me was a massive exodus of around 50,000 people. You can say 50,000 people out of 50 million were spared. And, Not very many. 1 out of 1,000 were found worthy to escape the oncoming judgments upon the West Coast. But I knew in my spirit, I was walking in the Spirit, the revelation of the Spirit, and I knew by the Spirit of revelation that these 5 miles of transport trucks, a 5 mile stretch, I don't know if it was single lane or double lane, don't know. I knew that they had everything they needed just to set up shop, everything they needed to send up to be able to survive, to build these off-grid communities. And for this convoy of 10,000 vehicles, probably between 40 to 50,000 people. And when the angel of the Lord appeared on my right hand side and in one of the visions, I was dressed in sackcloth. I was sent back up to Canada to bring forth this final warning. I had a staff in my right hand given to me by David Terrell, God's prophet to the world, and in my left hand I was holding a tube, this white paper tube, that were the completed plans for building these Goshen camps. And the Lord gave me my start in all this back in the summer of 1988. So I put in many, many thousands of hours, probably, I don't know, enough to get a bachelor's degree, right? Thousands and thousands of hours over decades of time by divine inspiration. So the Lord did a work within me to develop the isometric geometry to be able to build all this. So both the land and the buildings use the same geometry, right? Use the same construction. And so I'm at the place now. The plans are for building the micro camps and the macro camps, the 6 micro camps within a micro camp, and a macro camp. Macro camp is used to build the next upgrade into an ark ship. So if you had a 12-acre macro camp, your ark ship would be, you multiply that by 5 to get 60 acres. For around 500, 750 people, say under 1,000 people, a 60-acre off-grid community. And what makes it work, you go down to the micro camp level. The micro camp level has a center connector, a building in the center, and it has 6 trailers or 6 living facilities around it that's joined to the center, like a space station, right? Like a space station. Space stations use isometric geometry. The triangle is the strongest design known. The triangle is used as a key building concept for building the geodesic domes. So my most recent upgrade on the hub connector in the center, on the community center, that I've opted to go to to build a geodesic cover in the interior. The interior of the, if you had a dome that was 60 foot across, 30 feet from center, 60 feet across, it'd be about 30 foot high, around 3 stories high. You could use the relocation platform technology to make the the main floor that would be elevated off the ground, the second floor, and the top level. Now that's what I'm working on now. And so because you're going to have around 40 people per micro camp, so you're going to need a space large enough to be able to have people come down and have dinner and have supper, to fellowship, right, together. You still got your own place that you can go to. That families will have their own space. Well, these domes need to be manufactured in quick time. I've been a carpenter 40 years. I've been around boats. I've been around all kinds of different fabrications. I know how to build with wood. But we're coming into a time where there's going to be lots of shortages, right? But anyway, so the plan is to build these geodesic domes in the center. And it may be possible to use a 3D printer to make the inverse molds. Geodesic dome is made up of around a half a dozen different shapes, depending on the frequency. If you got a geodesic dome, it may have a 6-panel design or a 5-panel design, right? And the pie shapes could be printed off. Say if you're going to make a pie shape, you would use a 3D printer to print the mold, right? Because it has to be 100% precise, right? Even make you can make it so that they snap lock together or bolt together. Where you can take your panels and you can make keyways where they slide in. There's people that are brilliant that could figure this out. So anyway, you use a 3D printer to make an inverse mold. Once you got your inverse mold, you could use, say, cloth impregnated cement to layer it up. It's like building a boat, right? You put on your slip form, your color. You can put on that's probably be the best, using a fabric that's impregnated with cement to where you're going to create that outer shell. Then you can build it up with maybe a chopped hemp and resin to build it up, to make it, to layer it up, and maybe to spray in your hempcrete after that, to where you would have maybe 1.5 inches to a 2-inch thick panel. It's going to weigh a little bit. You want to be able to manufacture this in quick time. But if you can use a 3D printer to perfect the inverse molds, once you got your molds perfected, then this can be mass produced in every state in America. You just have, if you got the 3D printer, you'd be turning out the inverse molds for the entire dome, right? You only have to make so many shapes. And then you start, the challenge is going to be the positive molds. So you take the positive molds, you put it together, you do your foundation work, you put it together. This could be permanent or could be used as a mold to spray on, to put shotcrete and steel to make a concrete shell. Then you take that mold apart and you go to the next micro center and do the same thing, right? It can be done. The Lord gave me the plans for building the places of refuge in the summer of 1988. the Holy Spirit spoke to me. He made it very clear, these words. He said the time is coming where a year's labor, you can figure out how much work a person puts in on the job in the course of a year, that a year's labor will have to be compressed into a single day. So this is going to be your crew. You're going to have to be able to compress, put out between 2,000 to 2,500 hours per day, right? You divide by 8, and that gives you the crew. That's the times we're coming into. So you're going to need a 3D printer to make your inverse molds, so you can mass produce it, right? If you got one 3D printer, you could build 100 3D printers and start turning this stuff out by mass, right? And if you take a look at building with conventional material, lumber, insulation, and things like that, plywood, nails, screws, it's going to take a lot longer, 3 times longer, and double or triple the cost. So being able to set up a geodesic dome using a 3D, by making the 3D printing the inverse molds and taking your positive molds from that to make your geodesic dome, you can customize it. You would have one company making the portals, and so you could have light coming in, and you could use aircrete and steel on the outside for your shell. So you could have a shell that would be 2 inches thick, maybe 3 inches thick, of foam crete, then layer the outside with a high density cement, fiber polymer mix or something like that. But these are going to have to go up in quick time. So 7 days to build a geodesic dome. The time it gets on site, the excavators are there, and you lay down your footings. You lay down your vertical support, your footprint, like your pony wall system for the dome. The panels are brought in, and you start setting up the dome panels. And once they're set up, then you could pop some screen on it. You get enough people working, you could probably do the steel work in a couple days, and then you shotcrete it. And the technology's out there. It'll be the cheapest, most efficient, most diversified approach for all this. So once you got that done, you have a geodesic cover. It's breathable. You got your light coming in. It needs to be vented, right? And then you can start building the interior levels using the relocation platform technology. And so what I'm doing now is designing the size of the hub connector of the community center. It's probably going to be an H31 using 8-foot geodesic panels, hexagonal panels that could be made under the same construct. You might be able to incorporate waste, paper, plastic for all this stuff too. Extrusion, vacuum forming. But there's going to be need for tens of thousands of these panels. You're going to have to be able to replicate them quickly. They're going to have to be transportable. That's what I saw in the visions. They were transportable. Over 5 miles of transport trucks. That's around at least 250 transport trucks, fully loaded with a new type of building technology. But using the domes would be the most efficient approach. Because once you have the molds, you're on your way. Once you got the molds, now it's happening, right? You put up the shell, you spray on the exterior, and you take apart the interior dome that's used for the mold, You have to design it to where you can take it apart on the inside in one piece. You see what I'm saying? And it's not going to be all that hard. You know, it just takes people coming together. The money's going to be there, but the trick is how fast can you spend the money as it comes in, right? Now this is going to have to go up everywhere. So there needs to be a prototype to go up this spring. Once the plans are complete, you need to take it from the engineering perspective, and you start. Then you need a 10-acre plot, a 40-acre plot would be better to start making the first. Like you would develop your macro layout, your 10-acre, 12-acre macro camp, which is made up of 6 micro camps, and so you put the macro camp together into a binary solution design with another 12-acre hexagonal plot in the center. Now you got a macro camp here, you got a macro camp here, and the center becomes the spiritual gathering point, and to where you could have facilities for 500 or for 500 people, seating for 500 to 1,000 people, like that. This is going to have to be done. And I've been beating my head against the wall all these years. Says, Lord, these places should have been done. And you can't force it. You can't go ahead of the Lord. But this past summer or spring, I was very sick. I was at the point of death off and on for the last 10 months. My health took a critical turn downward. And this past May, May of last year, I've been given my ticket to move, and I have to move. And I had to postpone till June because I couldn't even do 10 minutes work without having no strength, right? I came down with long-term COVID after the Lord delivered me from smoking for the first part of March last year. So my health took a downturn. But anyway, the Lord spoke to me back then, and he said that get moved, get settled, and once you're settled, to finish the plans that you started. So these would be the Ark ship plans, and comprised of Goshen camps, right? And so that's what I'm doing. And critical times, millions of Americans are about to go home. Because most of the church is not prepared. If God will allow them to live in the times you're coming into, that their faith would fail, and that they would be forced to take the mark of the beast. So in His mercy, God's going to take much of the church world home in death and judgment. We're talking this year, next year, right? And the 3 days of darkness comes. With it comes also the judgment on the East Coast. You can check it out. And once the East Coast comes on under judgment, all eyes will turn to the West Coast. And that this Exodus will have to get together. I can't force God's hand. God has His timing in all this. That we just need to be ready. In order to carry out the Father's will, His instructions, while we're here on this earth, that we need to first to develop that relationship with Him. Come into that place of rest with him. And if maybe you don't understand what I'm saying, but if you take the time to Google a man of God, his name is Neville Johnson. He's got many excellent videos out there that'll teach you the principles of the kingdom of God, of how to enter into the rest. And those who enter into the rest of God will be protected under the shadow of the Lord, that these places of refuge will have a divine covering or protection. Not even the demonic entities will be able to penetrate these places. You know. Anyway, I'm not going to keep you too long, but this is a reply back to Frederick. And the answer is out there. But it's going to take people coming together by the Spirit of the Lord to come up with a simple formula, a step-by-step solution on how to put together a plan to use a 3D printer to make the inverse molds that you can start fabricating the positive panels to put together a geodesic dome. You know, to go from there. That's it. And overall, it'll be the cheapest, best, most efficient, quickest solution. Because if you go to conventional materials, it costs a fortune, and it take a lot longer to build. Can be done. It doesn't take long to frame up a house. This house that I'm staying in here, I had to move it all by hand, right? That's the way I designed it. Anyway, I'm going to leave it here, and God bless you.